The snow was falling in thick, silent sheets, blanketing the earth in white serenity as the wind whispered secrets through the trees. On the edge of the forest, where the pines stood tall like ancient guardians, a humble farmer named Elias trudged along the icy path with a bundle of firewood slung over his shoulder. His breath rose in soft plumes, his cheeks red with the chill, and his boots left crisp prints in the undisturbed snow. He paused at the edge of the trail, eyes narrowing. A strange shape lay motionless near a fallen log, too large for a fox, too still for a deer. Dropping the bundle of firewood, Elias rushed forward, his instincts overriding his caution. There, half buried in snow, was a woman. Her coat was elegant but soaked, her fingers bare and trembling, and her face, though pale and marred by frost, carried a grace that made Elias catch his breath. "Miss?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" No response, only a faint breath fogging the air. Without hesitation, Elias scooped her into his arms and began the arduous trek back to his cottage. The snow protested beneath his boots, but his resolve was fierce. Whoever she was, whatever brought her here, none of it mattered now. She was dying, and he had the means to help. His home was modest, tucked between two hills like a secret kept from time. Inside, the scent of burning cedar and boiling herbs greeted him. He laid her gently on the couch near the hearth, removed her soaked coat and boots, and wrapped her in every blanket he could find. Her skin was ice, her lips tinged blue. Elias's hands moved swiftly, placing warm stones near her feet and spooning her a bit of the broth he had made that morning. Hours passed. Snow kept falling outside. Elias never left her side. Finally, her eyelids fluttered. She inhaled sharply, blinking at the firelit room and the man beside her. "Where am I?" she croaked. "You're safe," Elias said softly. "I found you in the woods. You fainted in the snow." She tried to sit up but grimaced in pain. "I was driving, took a wrong turn. My car, it skidded. I think I hit something and just started walking." "You shouldn't have," Elias said with a gentle scold. "You could have frozen to death. You're lucky I was nearby." Her eyes, a striking gray, met his. They were intelligent eyes, haunted by something more than cold. She studied him, his rough clothes, weathered hands, and kind expression. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name's Elias," he said, offering her a cup of hot tea. "And you are?" A flicker of hesitation passed across her face. Then she simply said, "Anna." He didn't push further. Days passed. The storm raged on, trapping Anna in Elias's home longer than either expected. At first, she kept her distance, answering questions with polite restraint. But slowly, warmth returned to her voice. She marveled at the simplicity of the life Elias led, his morning routine, his patience with the animals, the way he spoke to the trees as if they were old friends. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, Anna watched Elias from across the room. He was carving a small wooden bird, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You could sell those, you know," she said. He chuckled. "To who?" "Nearest town's 30 miles out, and folks there barely buy what they need. You could go farther. And leave this." He gestured around the cozy space. "This is all I need." Anna was silent for a moment, her gaze distant. "You don't dream of something more?" Elias glanced at her, the candlelight softening the lines of his face. "I used to, but dreams change. When my parents passed, I inherited this land. Could have sold it, but I didn't. This soil holds my family's stories." Anna's throat tightened. She hadn't spoken of her life, hadn't dared to. Yet something about Elias's honesty, his grounded presence, made her long to shed the layers she'd wrapped around herself for so long. "My father died last year," she finally said. "Left me everything. Properties, investments, companies. I haven't had a moment of peace since. Everyone wants something. Everyone smiles with lies." Elias set the carving down. "And you came here to escape?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't plan to. I just kept driving. I wanted to disappear. And yet here you are," he said, voice soft, "found by a stranger in the snow." They shared a silence that said more than words ever could. The next morning, Anna stood outside the cabin, gazing at the snow-covered hills. Her phone, charged now thanks to Elias's solar panels, buzzed with messages. Her assistant, her lawyer, the board of her company. All frantic, all demanding. She slipped it back into her coat pocket and turned to find Elias watching her from the porch, a mug of coffee in hand. "They'll be sending a search party soon," she said with a sad smile. "I figured as much." She walked up to him, her breath frosting in the air. You didn't ask. About who I really am. I didn't need to. Why? Because people are more than their names or their money. I see who you are here. He touched his chest. And that matters more. She blinked hard. No one had spoken to her like that in years, without expectation, without calculation. Just truth. I don't want to go back, she whispered. You don't have to decide now, Elias replied. The snow hasn't melted yet. She laughed softly, and stayed. Each day after, Anna found herself more at home in the rhythms of farm life. She helped Elias feed the animals, learned to split wood, and even tried her hand at baking, though her first attempt at bread could have broken a window. They shared stories by the fire, and Elias taught her to listen to the silence between the wind and the trees. One evening, a call finally came through. The storm had cleared. A helicopter was on its way. Anna stood in the doorway of the cottage, suitcase in hand. Elias, leaning against the railing, said nothing. She looked at him, then back at the snow-covered landscape. Her chest ached. They're expecting me. I know. I'll come back, she said. I promise. Elias smiled, but his eyes betrayed a quiet doubt. City people say that. I'm not the same person who walked into the snow. He nodded, stepping forward. Then go show them. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, Elias watched until it disappeared beyond the hills. He returned to his carving bench, picked up the half-finished bird, and worked in silence. 2 weeks passed. Then a letter came. Handwritten. No return address. Asterisk, the board approved the sale. I dissolved the company. I'm buying land near yours. I hope you'll teach me how to plant roots. Asterisk, Anna. Elias folded the letter, a slow smile spreading across his face. Outside, the first buds of spring had begun to bloom. Elias placed the letter beside his carving tools and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at spring but still held the memory of winter's breath. He stood on the porch, eyes scanning the horizon, not searching but simply feeling. There was a quiet stir within him, a sense that the earth itself had shifted, like a door slowly opening after years sealed shut. He spent that day in silence, tending to the soil, repairing the broken fence by the goat pen, and sanding down an old chair that had seen better days. Everything felt subtly different, as if Anna's letter had awakened something dormant in him, something long buried beneath years of routine. He thought often of her words. Asterisk, teach me how to plant roots. Asterisk, that wasn't a casual promise. It was an invitation. A beginning. Days became weeks, and true to her letter, she returned. Not in a flurry of limousines or accompanied by bodyguards, but in a dusty old pickup truck that sputtered up the gravel path with all the stubbornness of a city girl trying to fit into a rural rhythm. When she stepped out, her coat was simple, her hair tied back, her smile bright but nervous. You're early, Elias said, walking toward her with a steady, amused expression. I figured if I waited too long, you'd think I was bluffing. He held out a hand, not to shake hers, but to help her carry a box from the back of the truck. She handed it over, and in that small gesture, something unspoken was exchanged between them. Respect, trust, a flicker of affection not yet spoken aloud. The land Anna had bought was just over the hill from Elias's farm, an abandoned property with overgrown fields and a crumbling barn. Elias helped her clear it out, spending long days pulling weeds, repairing fences, and restoring the barn beam by beam. She worked alongside him, blistering her hands, smudging her cheeks with dirt, and laughing in a way she hadn't laughed since she was a child chasing fireflies through her grandparents' orchard. She didn't talk much about her past life, and Elias didn't pry. But every so often, it slipped through, a memory of boardroom battles, of hollow friendships, of nights in glass towers overlooking cities that never slept. Elias listened without judgment, offering silence when words were too heavy and steady encouragement when doubt threatened to return. One afternoon, while they were planting apple saplings in a corner of her land, Anna looked over at him and said, "Did you ever imagine your life would intersect with someone like me?" Elias leaned on his spade and gave her a thoughtful look. Life doesn't care about plans. It's like rain, it falls where it wants, whether we're ready or not. She smiled at that, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then I'm glad the storm brought me here. The seasons turned. Trees bloomed and bore fruit. The air grew sweet with the scent of lavender and hay. Elias taught Anna to identify bird calls, to read the sky before a storm, and how to whisper to animals without speaking a word. In turn, Anna taught him how to digitize his crop inventory, how to file for grants, and how to use the internet to sell his carved wooden crafts to a wider audience. His quiet life, though still grounded, began to stretch its limbs into the world beyond. Their companionship grew slowly, organically, like the trees they'd planted together. It wasn't dramatic or filled with declarations, but woven into the details. Elias saving her the ripest berries, Anna leaving notes tucked inside his coat pocket, both of them pausing a little longer each time their hands brushed. There were quiet evenings under the stars, cups of tea shared by the fire, and long walks through the misty fields where they spoke not with words but presence. One evening, as twilight wrapped the hills in blue and gold, Anna stood beside Elias on the porch of her now-renovated farmhouse. A lantern glowed behind them, and crickets filled the silence. "Do you ever think we met by chance?" she asked, arms folded against the breeze. Elias glanced at her, then back at the horizon. "No," he said softly. "I think you were meant to be found." Her eyes shimmered, reflecting the sky's fading light. She took a step closer, and for the first time, reached for his hand without hesitation. He didn't flinch, didn't move away. Their fingers interlaced, fitting together as easily as breath and air. The next morning, the village was abuzz. People were curious about the wealthy woman who had not only chosen to settle in their quiet valley, but had immersed herself in its rhythm with a devotion few expected. Some gossiped, others watched with suspicion, but most eventually softened. Anna didn't flaunt her wealth. She dressed like them, worked like them, listened more than she spoke. When the local school needed new books, she donated quietly, under Elias's suggestion, without putting her name on a plaque. When the harvest festival arrived, she baked pies from scratch, burning the first batch but proudly presenting the second. Children adored her. Elders praised her humility. And Elias, ever watchful, ever quiet, stood beside her like a steadfast oak as she grew roots in the soil they now shared. Their story was never written in headlines or sung by bards, but whispered through generations by those who saw them walking hand in hand through golden fields. They were two souls weathered by life, healed by earth, and bound not by fortune or fate, but by choice, a daily choosing of one another. And so, as another winter approached, and the first snowflakes danced from the heavens once more, Elias looked out his window and saw Anna standing in the snow, arms wide, eyes closed, smiling at the sky. He walked out to her, wrapping his old wool scarf around her neck. "You'll catch cold," he murmured. She leaned into him, laughter in her voice. "Then I'll just have to be rescued again." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "Anytime, Anna. Every time." The snow continued to fall, quiet as breath, cloaking the valley once more in a gentle white hush. But this time, it wasn't a symbol of danger or isolation. It was a reminder of everything that had changed since that first storm, the one that nearly took her life and, unknowingly, gave it back in a different form. Anna stood beside Elias as flakes melted in her hair and on her lashes, and she looked out across the land that had become more than just home. It had become her salvation. No longer did she chase deadlines or drown in numbers. No longer did her life revolve around board meetings and shareholders. Here, every morning started with the chirp of sparrows and ended with the golden silence of dusk. She didn't just live now, she belonged. The community had embraced her not because of her wealth, but because of her heart. Because she stayed. Because she worked. Because she had proven that change is not in words but in actions. She hadn't bought their respect. She had earned it with every blistered hand, every shared harvest, and every time she chose humility over the comfort she once knew. The village schoolhouse, once crumbling and forgotten, now buzzed with life. The orchard she and Elias planted had begun bearing fruit, literal and symbolic. Children picked apples and ran laughing beneath the trees they had nurtured together. Farmers who once eyed her with skepticism now nodded in admiration when she passed. And every Sunday, without fail, Anna brought her handmade jam and fresh bread to the local market, standing behind her stall like she was born to be there. Elias watched all of this in quiet awe. He had always believed that life gave more than it took, if one knew how to listen to the rhythm of the land. But Anna, she was proof that even the most powerful storms could carry gifts wrapped in the guise of misfortune. He hadn't just found her in the snow. He had discovered a missing piece of himself. As seasons passed, their bond deepened, not rushed, not flaunted, but steady and sure, like roots growing beneath the surface. They never spoke in grand declarations. They didn't need to. Every look, every gesture was a vow. The farmhouse Anna restored began to feel like the second heart of the valley. Inside, it pulsed with warmth, music, and stories. The fireplace, once unfamiliar to her, now crackled with a glow that felt like laughter and old memories. And in that space, surrounded by cedar shelves lined with books and handmade ornaments, Elias and Anna created a life that was simple but magnificent in its simplicity. One evening, under a sky streaked with pink and orange, Anna held something behind her back as she walked to Elias, who was busy fixing a broken wheelbarrow. "You've been hiding something," she teased. He raised a brow. "I fix things, not secrets." She chuckled and held out what she had, a small, hand-bound journal with a leather cover. "What's this?" "My story," she said softly. "Not the one the magazines printed. Not the one the lawyers protected. The real one. The woman who lost herself in skyscrapers and found herself here, in your snow." Elias took it gently, almost reverently. "And what do you want me to do with it?" "Keep it," she said, eyes shining. "Because you were the chapter that changed everything." He said nothing at first, only looked at her the way only he could, with eyes that saw beyond the surface. Then he placed the journal beside him, stood, and reached for her hand. "Then let's keep writing it. Together." Their wedding was not grand, not adorned with diamonds or celebrity photographers. It was held under the wide oak tree near the stream, where wildflowers danced in the breeze. The guests were neighbors, farmers, and school teachers. Children tossed petals. An old fiddler played music that echoed through the hills like a lullaby. Anna wore a dress she made herself, and Elias carved their rings from the same cherrywood tree that had shaded his family's porch for generations. There were no speeches, only silence between two hearts finally finding their forever. In the years that followed, their love became the quiet legend of the valley. The woman who came from millions but gave it all up for a simple life, and the man who didn't know what he was missing until he found her in the snow. Together, they grew not just crops and trees, but legacies. They opened a small library in the village with Anna's collection of books and Elias's handcrafted furniture. Children who once walked miles to get a worn novel could now sit under lanterns and read stories that stirred their imagination. They mentored young couples who wished to start farms, teaching not only the work of the land, but the values of patience, trust, and devotion. And through it all, they never left each other's side. In joy and in the quiet struggles, through harsh winters and bountiful springs, they remained two souls stitched into one life. In her later years, Anna often walked the same snowy path where Elias had once found her. She never did so without remembering the cold, the fear, the moment she thought she'd vanish into the white, and the miracle of being seen. Of being saved, not just from death, but from a life that had numbed her spirit. She would return from those walks to find Elias waiting by the porch, a cup of tea in his hand and a knowing smile on his lips. They would sit in silence, watching the hills roll in shadows and sunlight, content in the life they had built from ashes and snow. And when one day, much later, the old valley bid farewell to two hearts now etched into its soil forever, the townsfolk did not mourn with tears alone. They celebrated. For theirs was not a story of loss, it was a tale of love rediscovered, of transformation, of the kind of quiet heroism that reshapes the world not with grand gestures, but with daily devotion. A humble farmer, a runaway millionaire, and a storm that changed everything. Some said it was fate, others called it luck. But those who knew the story best simply smiled and said, it was love, true, rare, and unstoppable.